Good morning. It's 11 o'clock. I'm going to start now. Hi, everybody. My name is Bert. I'm going to talk about living machines. Just a couple of words before what this is about. Living machines is a design conversation or a design talk. It's work that we've done in the work when we were working on the M2M area in Telefonica. And our goal was basically to explore philosophically deep into the nature of machine and their role when it comes to humans and how we use them and what they actually mean to us, and how machines should be designed for the future to become a coherent part of human evolution, essentially. So this is not just about machines. Of course, essentially, it's in essence about humans in the center of an ecosystem of devices, tools, and machines that we use around us. So let's first, I'm first going to say a couple of words about machines in general and what they are. So humans more or less started using machines about 750,000 years ago. Some people say it's 1.6 million, basically creating the so-called stone axe, which is more of a tool than a machine, but essentially it's something that human uses to become more powerful, right? To increase our physical power. But then later this became, a hammer. Then much later this became an excavator. We also invented other machines like, for example, to be able to faster move through space. Humans built roads and then put cars in it and moved around. Or since humans wanted to be able to fly, they built planes, which are another type of machines. Humans, for example, weren't able to talk to their aunt in the USA, so they built telephones, so they were able to talk to people who were not at the same place where they were physically. And then we invented some other kind of devices like this phone. And all these are machines. And these machines essentially are an extension of ourselves. And why is that? Well, that's basically the first kind of, actually one thing I wanted to say. So all these graphics that you're about to see are essentially design paradigms that we found that were used to be manifested in designs, the products we later built in the M2M area. So they're mostly some kind of metaphor, and I'll explain them one by one. So this first design paradigm, which is about that machines are extensions of ourselves, of humans, is based on the idea that the human has tasks that you carry out every day, like eating and moving around. And some of these tasks we're able to do ourselves. Like we go to the bathroom, we don't need any machine. Well, maybe actually we do. But there's a huge number of tasks that we are only able to carry out using machines, like flying, for example. So, but the core of this is basically that the tasks that machines carry out are human tasks, not machine tasks. So you will not find almost any machine in this world that is doing tasks that the machine does for its own sake. They're always human tasks, and this is core, and this is why they're extensions of ourselves. One other thing you will see in this visual is there is this red line connecting the machines, and this is of course something that M2M, machine-to-machine communication, has brought to this world, which is basically machines start developing some kind of conscience about each other, like they might know what the other machine is doing and what this means for its purpose of carrying out human tasks. And in this context, we could even call this part of human evolution, in a sense that that we're not thinking of evolution in a way that we imagine future humans to be cone-headed and bald, like me, very futuristic, but essentially that machines are an essential part of human evolution. And this is when it started, 750,000 years ago. We started first using some kind of tools and machines, and we extended our task sphere, or ecosystem of tasks. And now we're basically at this point over here, where machines are starting to become aware of each other and are connected, and thus become more powerful. The next paradigm that we found, and that I'll explain right now, is that the machine essentially is an organism, just as the human is an organism, as an entity. So looking at the human first, this is a very simplified model of the human organism. There's an outer shell, like we can see, that looks like a body. It's got arms and legs and mouth and face. But inside there's two major components, which are some kind of processor, which is up here, and all kinds of sensors all over my body. Like these eyes are sensors, this mouth is a sensor. If I burn my finger, there's a sensor that will tell me something is going wrong. So these sensors measure data and send it up to my brain where it's being processed. And could, for example, result in some kind of action. Now, looking at machines from this kind of mindset, they are essentially the same. So there's also an outer shell. This, by the way, it's supposed to be a machine. So they have some kind of processor inside, and now basically M2M introduces machines that have sensors that measure life-relevant data. So for example, there's a machine for which well-being it's important to maintain a certain temperature. This machine would have a sensor that measures its temperature. If the temperature goes above a certain level that's good for the machine, it would, for example, be sent to the processor, which is part of the machine, which we also have. But there's a third layer inside these two organisms, which is an expression layer, as I call it, which is basically the ability to speak out. So for example, if someone hits me in the face, I might say, ouch. It's a way to express that something might have gone wrong. Since a machine, there's actually two ways for a machine to do this. It could have just a small LED light that blinks red when something's wrong, but some machines just happen to be in remote places. So if they have some kind of connectivity layer, like a SIM card, for example, inside, they're able to communicate their state of well-being to the outside world. So the expression layer is very important, and I'll get back to the expression layer a couple of times later in this talk. So now, having said that machines are just as humans organisms, there's a reason why we're using this metaphor. And this is essentially kind of the first sort of value proposition, if you think of M2M, machine-to-machine products, which is essentially about maintaining your products in a good state, maintaining the life cycles of products, or it's almost like extending life. So still staying within the metaphor of humans and machines both being organisms, let's first look at the human. So the way our sensors and our brain and our expression layer work, it's very simple. In this first row, you can see essentially if I'm feeling fine and healthy, I'm happy. But so I might start getting sick. I might have some kind of virus in my body, and essentially my sensors, my body, would send this information to my brain. I would feel some kind of pain or some kind of not feeling well. So this will actually affect my emotion. I will feel bad, and my brain processes all of that, and essentially then I'm going to a doctor and tell the doctor, hey, I have a pain in my wrist or something. And the doctor will fix me and I will keep on living. But if all of this didn't exist, if we didn't have these sensors, for example, or in our expression layer, we would feel fine, we would start getting sick, but we wouldn't notice that because there's no feedback, there's no sensors. So we would be sick, but we don't notice it, we're still happy. And at the end, we might just die if there's no action taken. This is essentially what happened to machines until a very short time ago. Machines essentially, like think of a vacuum cleaner, for example, like some sort of component in a vacuum cleaner is broken, but the vacuum cleaner has no idea of that, and you just keep on using it. The vacuum cleaner has no way to tell you about that, and a vacuum cleaner, for example, or any kind of machine will essentially break. So in the world of M2M, the machine is starting to malfunction, but it would be able to detect the problem because there's a sensor measuring its well-being, and once the machine starts malfunctioning, it will process that, and it might communicate it to the outside world. It might request to be fixed, and then it will keep on working. So it's all about maintaining life cycles of machines. Which then takes us to our kind of second bigger part. And the reason why the speech is called Living Machines, because there seems to be something about life in this whole thing. And if we remember the graph with the tasks and the machines taken carrying out human tasks, there's a notion of life somewhere in there. So this is why it's called life and behavior. So first I will do a quick excursus around purpose of things. So if we think of the purpose of the existence of anything, it could be the purpose of human life, like why do we live, or it could be the purpose of a vacuum cleaner, right? There's some kind of purpose why all this exists. So for example, if there is some kind of purpose in anything existing, this will usually derive into some kind of task that something is carrying out. So for example, think of a human person and your purpose, well, I'll get to this in a second actually, but thinking of task, essentially the repetitive carrying out of task might result in some kind of role. So think, for example, if you are working in a company and your role might be that of being a boss. So you get to tell people what to do, you delegate stuff. So people essentially will accept you in that role and will essentially perceive you in as some kind of personality. And this is essentially a theory around almost like civilization, that basically we perceive personality as something very fixed, but essentially it isn't because it's always based on roles. So if you think of that person who's taken the role of a boss, for example, imagine the company closes down, next day that person is not being a boss anymore. So its perception, this person's perception, and also the other people's perception of this person's role or personality will radically change. So it's a very fragile kind of construct. And I just wanted to show this because the following models will be based on this model. So now this is a very essential part. I call this almost like provocatively the personality of a machine, and I'll tell you why. There's some trace of personality in there. So I'm using the model I just explained right here, but I carry it further out. So I'm using the example of a refrigerator, and it all starts with the purpose, right? So if you think about what is the purpose of a refrigerator, the purpose of a refrigerator essentially is to keep food fresh. It's not to cool. The purpose essentially is to keep food fresh. So the only reason why we all have a refrigerator somewhere in our houses is we want to keep our food fresh. So this purpose of the refrigerator to keep your food fresh derives into tasks. These tasks are to keep food cool, right? You lower it to a temperature of about 7 centigrades, and that will keep your food fresh, which is the purpose of the refrigerator. But task essentially is to keep cool. So I'll forget about this for now. So then tasks essentially become activities, which in the case of the refrigerator is the activity to just cool stuff. But now, most importantly, these activity based on your tasks, they could become needs. So a possible need of a refrigerator is to keep that temperature steady, which could mean, for example, that the refrigerator would have an interest to keep the door closed, or it has an interest to be connected to the electricity of your house. So these are needs that could arise. And now, most importantly, for any machine, and also for the refrigerator, if a need arises, there would be some kind of necessity to express that need. So it's like the refrigerator would be able to say something like, please close the door if it's opened, right? And I'll get in a later part of this talk into the expression part, like how should it actually be said? Because of course you don't want a refrigerator to talk to you. But more importantly then, the expression that's based on the need of a refrigerator would be, or could be perceived as behavior by humans. So we're still talking of a refrigerator. We're talking of a refrigerator with an imminent need to keep the door closed, for example, because its purpose is to keep stuff fresh. So if that need was expressed, and humans would perceive this expression as behavior, and this is, I think, the core of this theory, this behavior essentially would be perceived as something highly credible and tying back down to the purpose of this thing. But since this purpose, the purpose of this refrigerator is to carry out a human task, it becomes part of our life. And not just in the sense that the refrigerator is part of our life, essentially life is part of this refrigerator. So we would perceive this refrigerator if it was perfectly designed, which means if the expression layer of this refrigerator was perfectly designed, we would perceive this refrigerator as something that's actually living. And I'm not talking of something that's acting as if it was alive, but actually it is alive because it's doing our tasks. It's part of our life ecosystem. So if I apply this model to a human, it's the exact same thing, just different purpose and different tasks. So just to run this through using the human as an example, the purpose of life of a human essentially is, we could all argue about that, but possibly it's about maintaining our species, right? So, and this derives into tasks, which are all around staying alive, surviving, right, all the time. So we breathe, we eat, and we have sex, right? So all we basically do on this level is we run around and trying to have sex and trying to eat all the time and sleep sometimes. That's all we do. That's all we do. So if you kind of break this down into activities, you could break it down. So, you go food gathering, you go grocery shopping, you try to be social, you socialize, and so on and so on. Try to have a nice job. But also, of course, this derives or this causes needs. So, for example, one need could be, have a nice nutrition level, or have your social standing in a good place. And also, we do express this. So, for example, you might say something like, "I really like you. I think you're a nice person." So we're socializing, right? Or you could say something like, "I like to work for this company," right? Because you want to maintain your job. So, of course, obviously, this is also behavior, and of course, we kind of find it credible to be an expression of something that is life, and is a purpose. I also have a counter example to actually really make clear this idea that in the machine is essentially life, to take something to which it doesn't apply. So this, I don't know if you all know what Tamagotchis are. 1990s, I think, or late 80s, Japan, little kind of plastic devices. They ask you for food all the time, right? So you push a button and the little digital creature is happy. So this model essentially breaks with this device because if you think also back, the purpose of this device is basically to create an illusion of life. This is the purpose of this device. This is why people bought this or still buy it. So essentially the task of this device is to always ask for food, continuously ask for food or some kind of remedy. But the real need of this device has nothing to do with food. It's false, it's a fake need. I think the real need of this device essentially is to have a battery or something. But the expression and behavior level of this device have nothing to do with needs, and they have nothing to do with its task and purpose. So the whole system breaks, and this is not about life. You cannot fake life. So this is really important to understand that this is not about copying or biomimicking life and thus create an illusion of life. It's about it essentially machines are life. Because again, they're doing our tasks. So this is like generic, actually, pointing out that the needs are measured by sensors, for example, in an M2M scenario, and part of the expression could be done through, connecting these devices. But so this is kind of core to understand this whole theory about what is the machines are actually living machines. And one last thing around the purpose and the meaning of a machine, which maybe is a bit far out, but it's kind of interesting actually. So if we, and I call this the scalability of meaning, if we keep this part of the model where it's about life's purpose that actually is meaning of something, of anything. So if machines were designed in a way that their expression coherently ties back to their purpose, task and purpose, we would as humans perceive this fact that machines are part of this life. And this is very abstract, but if you were able to scale this out, scale up meaning, humans might actually become highly happy because they understand about their own purpose. Because again, machine purpose and human purpose, it's not the same thing, but it's hyper-related because, again, the machine purpose is based on our task as humans to survive and to maintain our species alive. So essentially understanding the meaning and the purpose of a machine, essentially, this is abstract, I know, means understanding about our own purpose and own meaning. And I mean, I think it's like a general psychological insight that knowing of your purpose makes you kind of happy. Because if you don't feel purpose, you don't feel very happy. But anyway, talking of purpose. So there's like another couple of design paradigms that we came up with, which could be applied to machines and their design. And one is that of the endangerment of purpose. It's very simple. If you are, for example, if you were a vacuum cleaner, knowing if you had a conscience of your purpose, which is to keep the house kind of dust-free, and your task is basically absorbing dust into your body, and so on, you would have a high interest to be used. Otherwise, there's no purpose. Otherwise, you could be destroyed or thrown away or converted into something else. So it's basically just saying that a vacuum cleaner would have, based on this whole theory, an interest to be used. And that's all. But this applies also to us. And having said this, there's another kind of sub-principle or subset to this, which I call the win-win situation of giving and taking tasks. And it's basically about a machine proposing tasks to human. So the scenario is kind of, imagine there is a house, and there is a machine inside, which is a vacuum cleaner, and there is a teenager who's very bored, or an elderly person who basically has no job to do, and just sits there. So there's a vacuum cleaner and a human sitting there doing nothing. The vacuum cleaner has an utter interest to be used because this will fulfill his purpose. Assume that the vacuum cleaner had knowledge that there's a human around that is doing nothing. It would understand that there's a win-win situation by the human actually using the vacuum cleaner, and both would feel purpose. This might be also a little bit abstract, but if you think about it, it makes kind of sense, actually. And now let's actually shift to the expression that we talked about previously. Like how would a refrigerator, for example, indicate that it needs to do or to close its door? Or think of the vacuum cleaner who has the dust bag full of dust and it needs the dust to be removed. So and think of a scenario, for example, if your machines would talk to you, actually talk to you, you would all hate it because you would enter your kitchen when you come home from work and 50 machines would talk to you, tell me, remove this and do this and change this and this is not what we want. So expression is not just talking. Expression is actually a more complex thing. And this is basically breaking expression into kind of three pieces to understand what kind of fragments does expression have in general. And there's two kind of expression fragments. There are refiners and there are intensifiers. It is very simple. A machine that expresses itself about its needs, and it's always about expression around needs, nothing else, is first of all indicating what kind of problem is happening. So think of the vacuum cleaner, for example. The problem is my dust bag is full. That's a problem. The severity is basically saying how full is the dust bag. So for example, it would be something like, it's good for another 2 minutes, otherwise it will like burst. And indicating the solution is about, what's the solution, which is basically change the dust bag. So ideally, all of these three pieces would be part of an expression, ideally. And again, this makes it even more challenging because I already said that we don't want machines to talk because they don't deserve to talk. They're too trivial to be talking. So basically, if this fits into a very different expression than talking, it's perfect. So we'll try to get there now. I want to establish one more principle around what I think expression of machines should be like. And I call this the coherence of expression and purpose. And it's very simple, but it's hard to explain. But essentially, thinking back to the refrigerator, for example, the purpose of the machine is to keep food fresh. And it uses certain components of itself to do that. For example, it's inside or the door is closed. If there's an expression around, for example, a need around the door, if the expression is tied directly to the components of the device that fulfill the task based on the purpose, it will work. It's hard to explain. This example might even make it harder to explain, but it's actually a very funny example. So let me tell you this really quick. So this is a MacBook. I have them here, and many of you have them as well. And you might all know the ones that use it. There's a sleep light here, right? A little tiny light. It looks like a human person, like a human breathing. We might like it because it feels so organic and so natural. But essentially, it's just a little gadget that's basically meaningless. But imagine this machine, which is a computer, which means we write our mails on it and you look at websites or movies. Imagine this machine was not a computer. Imagine this machine was a sleeping machine. It's hard to imagine, but imagine the purpose of this machine was to sleep, right? So if the purpose of this machine was to sleep, the expression of it doing it would be coherent with its purpose. It's a bit abstract, I think, again, but just try to imagine that. It's a sleeping machine, and the expression of its purpose and needs arising from it feel very coherent with its purpose. It's actually sleeping. It's a bit tricky, maybe. But what I want to get to now is basically something that we did to further explore into the expression of machines and their behavior in general. And what we did is we prototyped different scenarios based on some assumptions, based on these paradigms. So I want to show you 3 videos because we used videos to prototype that because it's one of the easiest or quickest way to actually show something rather complex. So what we did basically is we took a refrigerator and we tried our ideas around expression principles on this refrigerator, taking a video of it, faking it basically, and to see by looking at the video how this would actually feel and if there's some kind of value in there somewhere. So this first video I will show you is, and I'll tell you quickly about the scenario, then show the video. There's a refrigerator, there's a person that opens the refrigerator, keeps it open for too long. Refrigerator realizes, oh, I'm getting hot, I need to close the door. And the way for the refrigerator to communicate, to express that, is again not by blinking or beeping or saying something. It's by basically, I will show you the video. So there's a refrigerator. There's a human opening a refrigerator. The temperature is 7 degrees, which is good. Now this person gets a phone call and starts talking on the phone. And while talking on the phone, this person forgets about the refrigerator actually is opened, right? But you don't want the refrigerator to interfere with this phone call, for example. So the refrigerator goes up to 9 degrees, which is a problem, and it's trying to get the door closed. And the only way for it to do it actually is it pushes. Like it's trying to close its own door. It's like a natural expression coherent with the task, which is the door needs to be closed, so you just try to close it, right? That's all. And and basically the idea is that the expression layer is not interfering and it's not inadequate. So for example, a refrigerator is a highly dumb machine, right? Like it's very different from us. We are highly smart compared to a refrigerator. So you don't want a refrigerator to talk to you. You don't want it to speak. You don't want this. You don't want this. So we thought like the only component that is adequate enough to actually do something is the same door that needs to be closed. And this is what we mean with coherence. It's like right on the component that has the problem. So there's no need to interpret. Second principle, or second thing we tried out, actually it's a principle. It's called machine helps machine. And in this case, it's about, this is very interesting. Imagine there's two machines that have a very similar task range. So in this example, you have a vending machine for drinks, and you have a little water fountain. They look very similar to the ones we have in Telefonica, because they are in Telefonica. So they have a very similar task. The task is to keep people hydrated, right? To give people liquids. So and the idea is basically, if both machines have this very low, complex, low-level conscience of themselves, they know what they're good for, and the idea is one of them fails, one is broken, so the other one knows that, and understands that it could actually provide that task to the human. And we showed this vice versa. So here it goes. So we have the fountain and a vending machine next to it. So the human goes to the fountain, is trying to get water, but it doesn't work. It's not working. So the vending machine next to it gets aware of that, and what it does is, it just drops a bottle. It's an expression. So we have a principle also of expression here. So it's not that the vending machine would say, beep, 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 I have water, beep, 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 I have water. It just drops the water. It's very straightforward. And vice versa, I think it even works better. So the same scenario, just vice versa. So the person is trying to get water from a vending machine, and it doesn't work. So in this case, the fountain becomes aware of it. And there's a very interesting expression layer. The way for the fountain to communicate it actually is, we prototype that, doing this. It just spills water. Like it doesn't say beep, 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 I have water. It just spills water. So it's a very smooth, again, coherent expression layer that doesn't interfere with humans, right? You can actually ignore it. And it's all, and it seems very trivial, but if you think about it, there's something very deep behind this. Again, it's about human tasks, it's about machine being our slaves in a way, and how they should express themselves, right? And I mean, the importance of expression is essentially obvious if you think about the importance of their needs. Because again, these needs, solving them means actually keeping our humans basically happier. Last scenario is a bit of a crazy one, but it kind of combines the previously seen principles and adds a bit of complexity. So I call this the machine expression orchestra. It's basically, if there is a flow that involves several machines carrying out several tasks to make humans happy again, if they are conscious of each other, they could actually use each other to maintain the flow flowing. So in this case, it's a tea drinking scenario where we have four protagonists. We have a tea cup, we have a teapot, we have a kettle, you can't see this image, and we have a faucet, like where the water comes out. And this is what happens. So there's two humans having tea and having a conversation. And so one cup runs out of tea now. So the cup is aware that it's empty, and it's aware that it's good to be full, so it points to the teapot, where there's more tea. And the teapot recognizes that and points back to the cup. And again, they don't beep or say anything. You could easily ignore it, but in this case, humans get aware of it. It's a nice coherent expression, and it can refill the cup, which makes humans happy. In this next scenario, there's one more step now. It's actually a teapot that's empty. So humans are still drinking tea, and the teapot is pointing to the kettle, which looks very much like a teapot, but it's imaginally being a kettle. And kettle points back to the teapot. And of course, this might seem a bit exaggerated, and of course, these are experiments. Of course, they're very radical in a way. But it's about actually finding if there's pieces of meaning in there. Of course, you might never want something like this, but it's about looking at this and understanding there might be something actually that is maybe of value, right? The music is Kraftwerk, by the way. And in the last of this scenario, everything is basically empty. You have kind of a nice sort of hand overflow. So the cup is empty, it points to the teapot. Teapot's also empty. points to the kettle is also empty, so the kettle would finally point to the faucet, which has more water. This is it. So the last big part now to talk about is the topic that I call superorganisms. What I mean with this is basically, for now we've only been thinking in single entities of machines, one car, one plane, of one teapot and kettle. But what if, like, it's not about my car that I kind of, I'm using, but it's about, for example, a car rental company like Hertz or whatever that have hundreds of thousands of cars, or maybe 10,000 of cars, and essentially a single entity of a car is irrelevant to them, but the whole population of all of their cars is relevant. And it's also about maintaining their life cycle, keeping them alive, keeping them healthy, and have them basically make money for you, right? So the perspective, for example, for a car rental company is not a single car, it's all cars. And we call this superorganisms of machines. But first, a couple of words about what actually superorganism means and how we get to this idea, thinking of organization levels. So this is a bit of an excursus. So as of now, we've only been talking of the entity of an organism, of a human, for example, or the organism of a machine. But you could basically, focus on different relevance levels, looking at the different organization levels. So for example, you could step back and look at the cell level of a human organism, or maybe the organ level, or even go back further and look at the molecule level, and it's more, or the atom level. Or on the other end, you could look at a superorganism of humans. And it's all about what is relevant in each case. So in this example, for example, I'm using 3 different species of things, ants, humans, and machines, and to understand what organization level actually is more relevant. So for example, this is an organ level where, it could be a human heart, it could be a component of a machine, a part of an ant. They all seem kind of irrelevant. This seems to be way more relevant, one ant, but then again, one ant might be really irrelevant as well, because one ant doesn't really do anything. We might perceive a human entity as more relevant than an ant entity, or a machine entity just as important. But then again, if you think of superorganisms, and in the case of ants, it's very nice to think of them, we all understand what ants do in a big ant people, like they build their hills and they transform landscapes. So it seems to be like the more relevant organization level in the case of ants. In the case of humans, this could be, for example, a country, right? Or it could be a company. This could be, all the Telefonica employees basically shape one superorganism. Or I think a better example even is like a football stadium, all 60,000 people in a football stadium cheering. It's one entity of things. It feels like one organism. It's a superorganism. Or, and this is what we're going to talk about now, superorganisms of machines, like all these cars in this parking lot. One other organization level that's interesting to look at, for example, if you think of clusters of single entities, in the case of ants, again, it might not be so relevant, but here in the case of humans, way more relevant, because this could be, for example, a family, which is like, it's like in between a superorganism and a single entity of a human. It's like a family, it's a cluster. Or these, for example, could be, let's say, vending machines within one building or something. But now talking of superorganisms, to understand essentially what they really are, there's a very nice example with a video attached. So this is basically a jellyfish, and these jellyfish, like single jellyfish, hundreds of jellyfish that could come through as one superorganism, actually looking like one entity of something, right? And it's a nice example to show how we can perceive something as a superorganism. It feels like one entity, but it's not. It's hundreds of jellyfish. And they all have their assigned roles, and they just come through like one big thing. So it's very fascinating, as you can see. We've all seen that. So now basically thinking of superorganisms that are made of machines, going back kind of to the idea of an organism and its components, where we had the sensors and we had the processor. So if we take this or apply this to a superorganism, basically we have all these machines here. Each one kind of works as one sensor, which basically means if one breaks out of the system, it doesn't cause a big problem, but it's good to keep them all sort of alive, so the whole system kind of keeps flowing. And the processor in this case is kind of like a super processor. It's like an Uber brain, right? And this essentially in our work that we did in the machine-to-machine area. This, for example, was a portal, a web-based portal, where you were able to actually look at that and understand the well-being of the whole population of all machines. So these machines can be anything. So, for example, if it's a vending machine company, which means a company that has 10,000 vending machines and places them all over the place to sell Coca-Cola and sandwiches, so their superorganism is made of vending machines, right? So you control a superorganism of vending machines or coffee machines, like Nespresso machines and Nestle. They put their machines in some places and they are able to control the coffee level, or it could be superorganism made of alarm systems, right? So if you're a company that installs alarm systems like Securitas in houses here, you're able to control these alarm systems or point of sales for stores or traffic meters or cars. And this kind of model, thinking of superorganisms of machines, it results in something rather abstract that I call the body and soul transcendence. What I mean is basically machines and their multiplicity, what they do is they make us stronger, right? Or make us faster. Like it's something very physical. It's like something bodyful, right? It makes us stronger or faster, or we can fly. While if this is paired with the smartness of a M2M machine-to-machine system, it's like it's a digital service that makes us essentially smarter or mentally faster. So if the two of them come together, and this is why I'm using the same model that I showed in the superorganisms, it becomes some kind of transcendent system which makes us essentially better, I think, generically. So I'm almost through now. I think I have like 9 minutes left, or 8 minutes and 20 seconds. So since all of this is very abstract, and you might wonder, like, why do designers do that? Just a couple of examples how we actually applied these to a final product. So there's two things. So I talked a lot about superorganisms. And so the final product in this case, for example, was this portal that I mentioned earlier, where a company is able to control their machines, which are assets in this case. So these are just wireframes that I'm showing here. But it's just one example. Basically, if you are a company that owns, for example, 52,000 vending machines, right? In order to maintain this idea of a superorganism, we actually use this kind of straightforward as a view that seems somehow senseless, because you're not able to make any sense out of the single entities. But we take this metaphor into this final kind of design level of showing actually the superorganism. So you get this notion of this is my assets, these are all these machines. And when you zoom in, you start seeing more detail, and then you actually get to a level where you're able to pick one vending machine in this case and get to a detail level, kind of getting drilling down on the superorganism into the final entity of a machine. And here you can actually see another little detail, which is very detailed, but having talked about expression and the expression of machines and them always having to be based on needs that are based on purpose. So if you look at these little speech bubbles here on the side, the reason why actually it became speech bubbles is because metaphorically it's something that a machine would say, like I am cold or I'm hot. And having said this, as you see the tonality of what the machine says is actually, it's talking in the I form. It's saying, I am out of sandwiches. And this seems like a triviality, but it's based on deep design thinking, essentially understanding that it's credible for humans if a vending machine, it doesn't speak, right? But if it reads, I'm out of sandwiches. And since I have 7 minutes left, I will say one last thing then. So in our work around these paradigms and designing the system and understanding about machines and humans, there was also one idea that we had that is based on a couple of these paradigms, and especially around the paradigms around behavior of machines. So it's basically an idea that I called autonomous behavioral adaptation. And it's fairly simple to explain, I think. So if you think of vending machines and you're a company that owns vending machines, for example, the purpose of this machine is to sell sandwiches and Coca-Cola and all kinds of stuff. So like its task is to sell. Its side task would be to maintain, stay healthy. So the idea is basically, if you allow certain autonomy to these machines around certain parameters, and understanding the positive or negative effect on their main purpose, you could allow something that we call mutation of machines. So it's hard to see in this with this projector, but there's a yellow light that shines in this glass door, and there's a blue light, and there's a red light on this one. And the idea is basically, you tell the machine what is their success criteria, and you kind of, you weight them. So you say, to this type of machine, which is a snack machine, you tell it, it's most important for you to make monthly revenue, to sell all this shit. And secondly, it's important that you, for example, don't consume so much energy, right? So then you would allow one parameter to be changing within a range that you define. And in this case that I'm just using as an example, it's the light, the color of the light that shines within the machine. So imagine there is a machine in Tokyo that sort of autonomously changes the color of the light in different daytimes. And over time, the machine actually learns that it sells more Coca-Cola, for example, if it has a red light. Just imagine that as an example, right? So the machine over time learns I can sell more, I can meet my success criteria better if I use this specification of a parameter that I was freely varying. It's like a coincidental algorithm that changes the color of a machine, for example, right? So the machine has learned that it sells more Coca-Cola after 8 if it's on a red light. But then, this is probably more important, since it's a superorganism of machines, the machines that might be in New York or wherever else will also share this knowledge and will adapt to the behavior of the other machines. So it truly becomes kind of like a life form almost that learns from each other. And this is it.